All right, welcome to Don't Drink the Kool-Aid podcast. We have a fun episode in store today.
You have the whole gang here.
Yeah, we got the whole gang. This is the first time all
Yeah.
four of us have been together in one episode. Yeah, so we want to actually talk a little bit today about some of the criticism that's come in and people who have said we need to shut down our videos, take them off the internet. Let me just start by saying this. The response has been overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah.
So I think we've had hundreds of comments and 98% of them have been super positive. A lot of people have shared their own similar experiences. It's been very encouraging. And then every now and then you get a couple comments of people who don't agree. And we're fine with that. We're totally fine with people who don't agree. Our whole, the whole thing for us is we want to have a conversation and create the dialogue rather than shut down the conversation and stop dialogue. I think healthy, mature people are able to talk things out and able to, bring their points and allow, other people to listen and decide the truth for themselves. I think that's a healthy way of looking at things. And so for the most part, like I said, everyone has been very, very supportive, and we really appreciate all of you who have commented and supported, sent us messages and emails and all those things. It's been really, really cool. But we did want to kind of just respond to some of the criticism, because I think what's happening is the couple of people that are saying we should stop doing what we're doing, they all have the same reasons for it. Mm-hmm. And so I think rather than kind of responding to those people individually, it might be good just to do an episode where we say, look, this is why we're doing this. Yeah. This is why we're doing this podcast. We want to share our experience and we want other people to hopefully benefit from it. So, I think let's just get right into it and talk about some of the things. I think probably the most common thing is people want to bring up the Matthew 18 scripture when they say, you guys shouldn't be speaking out against the church. I think what we're doing is very different from what Matthew 18 is talking about. I think what happened to us is very different from what Matthew 18 talked about. And so we'll kind of get into that. The context, obviously, of Matthew 18 is like personal beef, like one believer to another, having an issue with one another. And
in private, not really public.
Exactly. In
that
private.
Sort of thing.
A private offense. It's like, hoping to restore a relationship. When someone did something to you privately, believer to believer, or friend to friend, or, church member to church member. It's not, and this is really important for people to understand about the context of Matthew 18. It is not talking about public teachers. It is not talking about public leadership. It is not talking about offenses that have come on a public platform like someone at the Potter's house would have. It's not talking about the abuse of authority of a leader. Mm-hmm. So it's very different. You can't, I guess my point is just Matthew 18 does not apply to the things that we're talking about, because I don't think we're addressing issues that happen to us privately, one person to another. We're addressing issues that were very public.
Yep, they were public, and we know many others have been affected by it, not just us, and we're offended and we're hurt, and so we're going to get you back. Mm-hmm. That's not what we're doing. They were very public.
Yes. Matthew 18 applies to personal sin between two individuals, but when a leader teaches publicly and acts publicly and harms people on a public platform, it's not a private dispute any longer. And so in that case, I think we have to read the whole Bible, not just use one scripture or the scriptures that fit our narrative the best, but we have to read the rest of the New Testament where it does talk about calling people out publicly, like 1 Timothy 5:20. Where it says, those who sin should be reprimanded in front of the whole church. This will serve as a strong warning to others. And that's applying to leaders. So that's a scripture that's applying to actual leaders. And you mentioned this, we were kind of talking about this the other day, and you mentioned just about like they have a public platform.
Yeah. they have a public platform, and one of the complaints that we got was the whole with Chris Hart, like you're blasting him publicly and you're not giving him a chance to respond. But he did respond to us publicly. When we had a problem with false prophecies, we played the video of him responding to us publicly in front of the whole church. And a lot of people in the church knew exactly who he was talking about because we had been very vocal about our stance at that time. So they have a public platform that they use to rebuke people, and we're using our public platform to respond, basically.
Yep.
And the other thing too is look at Jesus. Look at his example. How did he respond to the Pharisees? He didn't take them one-on-one and say, "Come here, brother, let me." He blasted them publicly because they also had a public platform, and he responded publicly to them.
Yeah, they had a public ministry. Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, just the reality is that, if you preach in the Prescott Church, you have sermons that go online and people from all over the world are watching it.
Yeah.
When you're prophesying in the Prescott Church, those prophecies are going around the world. These guys are doing these at conferences with thousands of people there, tens of thousands listening to those sermons and those prophecies online. So it's a very public platform. And what good does it do you to go to someone and, accuse them privately when in reality, I mean, let's be real about it. Like, think about that practically, like a church member walking up to a pastor and saying, "Hey, I disagree with your prophecies. I think you're a false prophet." Like, how do you think that goes?
Yeah.
Do you think that they're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, you know what? I'm going to repent and publicly apologize because of what you said."
Yeah.
And we did go to our pastors and bring it up before them, and said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And, the first response we got was, "Okay, I'll look into it."
Yeah.
Right. There was no, "Yeah, you're right." Or, I hear what you're saying and we're going to address it. It was just, we'll look into it. Right. So there wasn't any,
and there was no looking into it.
Yeah.
I don't think that time had passed. And did you guys have, you had spoken to him about the prophecy stuff like a while before that. And did they ever say they looked into it and this is what the, response was?
No, I never had a report back until basically we were called into the office and kind of getting grilled for, sowing a spirit of disunity, basically. So it was a couple weeks time and I never heard anything back as far as I'll look into it. But the reality is with all that is that I had decided to shut my mouth and trust my pastors for 3+ years. And that obviously led us to a place where we thought, okay, our pastors are actually in favor of all that's going on, because what I said to myself was, I trust my pastors, they'll deal with it. I'm not going to make a scene. And over the course of several years, they didn't deal with it, and it just got worse and worse. And so that sent the message, this is not going to correct itself.
Yeah, like just the statement that, "Oh, we'll look into it." I feel like that's just a way of them being like kind of dismissing it so they can move on.
And with the things that I was saying to the head pastor at that time, there's no way that he doesn't recall some of those things. I don't think he's just not paying attention. Yeah. And I know he travels a lot and all that, but he's there for a lot of it. So
I think just the reality of it is you are a public pastor with a public platform in a public setting, and you are accountable for your words. And you're accountable for your actions, and you're accountable publicly.
Publicly.
And that's just the reality of it. I think, I'm sorry, but Matthew 18 doesn't apply to that situation. And we have every right biblically to call someone out publicly because they have a public ministry. That's you see Paul do that with Peter, right? Peter's doing something publicly and he's hurting people because he's acting one way in front of with the Gentiles, and then when the Jews show up, he stops hanging out with the Gentiles because he doesn't want to look bad. And Paul calls him out publicly, and he says, and he said, I called Peter out, right?
Yep.
And so there's a public rebuke for someone who's in public ministry. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes that's your only recourse, because the reality is we brought up the problems that we had with what was going on with prophecy, and they didn't want to address it at first. And then when it was so egregious, right? Like, I have a counseling session with you in the morning, and that night, the stuff that we talk about gets thrown into a public prophecy for the whole church to hear.
The whole world to hear, because it's recorded.
Yeah, it was so egregious that at that point they had to do something about it. And then, so then we told him to stop and to reassess. And ever since that time, Chris hasn't been able to prophesy or preach, I don't think.
As far as we know.
Yeah. So the pastors obviously did respond in that sense, because what he did was so obvious and so egregious that they're like, okay, we have to do something about it now. But by that time, we had already left.
Yep.
And we didn't get like a phone call, or I heard that he was going around and apologizing to people in the church that he had given prophecies to, and said, hey, I'm sorry if this hurt you in any way, which I totally am appreciative of him for doing that.
Yeah.
But why wouldn't he give us a call? Because we literally left the church over it.
Yeah.
And to add to that, that's fine. And thank you for doing that. But the biblical pattern would be that he needed to be rebuked publicly.
Yes.
And that would eliminate the confusion that was happening. Is
Yes.
publicly stating, we do not agree with this. This
Right.
is not okay. And false prophecy is a sin
Yes.
that needs to be rebuked publicly.
Right.
And to reiterate 1 Timothy 5:19, those who are sinning rebuke in the presence of all, that the rest also may fear.
Right.
So, yeah, we take this seriously.
Yep.
And it's not like, oh, I hear a word and it's off and I'm just kind of like, meh.
Yeah.
That's not acceptable.
Yep.
That's not okay.
Yeah, he's downplaying all of that. Like during that conversation with you guys, he downplayed it so much, and then tried to just reemphasize
Well, give people
his points.
Yeah, you're exactly right, and maybe just give people the context of that, because we're throwing that into this conversation. People might not know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
so the context is, as I sat with Jesse Morales, the assistant pastor of the Prescott Church, is that, we had a major problem with just to put it in a nutshell, the fact that this manufacturing of the supernatural, we were trying to force the supernatural in the church. We had a major problem with that. And his whole point of view was that, well, there are some words that are good too, right? Do you recall anything that was accurate and spot on and whatever? When I hear a word that's like kind of off or whatever, or a prophecy, I'm able to just be like, meh. And I just go home and I don't think about it anymore. And to us, that is the heart of the problem, is that you can take something like that and say, meh, and not address it to your church. You are the shepherd over this church.
Yeah.
You are the one who should be saying publicly, what happened today, we don't agree with that. And we're rebuking it. So that we're not all wondering, where does this church stand on that issue?
Yes. Yes, and I think it's also good to point out that it's not like this was a one-time thing. Like, I could understand if you make a mistake every once in a while. There is an element of faith when it comes to the prophetic words and the gift of, the gifts of the Spirit. So I think sometimes there's room for people maybe to be like stepping out in faith, and, in that case, maybe they don't get it right every time. But when there is a pattern, a repeated pattern, I think that's where... And we didn't bring it up until there had been a repeated pattern of things that were wrong and false, that were like blatantly false,
Yeah.
I think too, like one of our big arguments was like, if you're like, brother, I feel like God wants me to tell you, let me know if this is right or wrong. Like, you're stepping out in faith, but it's also like somewhat of a testing. Whereas you have a lot of men in that church that will say, thus saith the Lord, and they will say something that is intended for you to believe that it is coming directly from God's mouth. And
Right.
that is totally different.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, if someone says, thus saith the Lord, it just takes away any wiggle room as far as accuracy goes, because now you are claiming to be the mouthpiece of God.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think, another point there is that Titus talks about the qualities of a leader, and one of the qualities that a leader is meant to have is able to refute error, able to refute bad doctrine, right? And which means part of the job of a leader is, there are going to be people who disagree with you, and you need to be doing the right thing, because you have to be able to back up what you say and back up what you are teaching and preaching and doing over the pulpit on that platform. And so that's another example of us being, as the body of Christ, as the believers who, are, they're experiencing, Christ through our leaders, and trying to partner together with them. We're the ones in a lot of cases who are the victims, the ones being hurt by the spiritual abuse, the toxic leadership, the false prophecies and those things. And we have the right to bring up disagreement, and they need to be able to stand behind what they're doing. And if they can't, there's a bit of a problem there.
Yep.
I think we're seeing this in the charismatic world, church world as a whole, with Sean Bowles and the stuff that's happening with Bethel, right? So here's a guy who is data mining information off Facebook, and he gets called out. And if you watch some of the videos, I mean, they're so disgusting, I think is the only way to describe it.
Yeah.
Because here's this guy up there on the stage acting like he's so smart and so powerful and so used by God. And he's like, yeah, does May 21st ring a bell for you? And people are like, that's my birthday. And then the whole crowd's like, oh my gosh, he's so spiritual. And then he's like, yeah, so does Jamba Juice ring a bell? And they're like, I work at Jamba Juice. And the whole crowd's like, oh my, everyone's freaking out. And then come to find out, he's just mining information off of Facebook. And then
go to a fortune teller.
yes, that's
crazy.
Exactly what it is.
God.
There's a sense of pride about it. And I'm not saying that's obviously, I'm not saying Chris was doing that.
Yeah.
But I think there's an element of that where someone is, someone is allowing their own kind of desires in their own heart to mix in with what they want God to do or what they think God's going to do. And that's very dangerous.
Well, and there is some element of that. It's not directly like pulling birthdays and, workplaces off of Facebook, but taking information that was counseled over with people in the church and then speaking a word
right
that falls in line with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this was one of my biggest problems with Chris Hart prophesying, or even like one of our local evangelists.
Yeah.
I don't agree with you allowing someone to walk around and give prophetic words when they know everybody's business.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the pastors talk, like they know what's going on in the church. They know the things that people are dealing with. So it's very convenient when you're the one counseling people and you know information about them, you know what they're dealing with. It's very convenient for you now to come in and give them this word from God about their circumstances when it's like, what's going on behind the scenes. And the same thing happens when we let evangelists do that in the church who know people, who know everybody. It's like, I just think it's not necessarily saying that, it's wrong, but it's just leaving this opening for people to use information and try to put on this spiritual face and look super spiritual by prophesying to someone things that they already know about. That's kind of like the Facebook data mining stuff going on. Mm-hmm. But yeah, public leaders, public platforms, and we have the right to disagree and do it publicly, right?
Yep. Don't get mad that we are using our platform the same way you use your platform.
Mm-hmm. All right. Another one that would be good to bring up that people have criticized us over is the whole idea of don't touch the Lord's anointed. Ooh. I think that's one that that's one that I have seen as well come through in a couple of comments. It's like, the Bible says, touch not the Lord's anointed.
Yeah.
And that, these men should be shielded from correction because of their position and their anointing, as you know, that comes from the idea of David not killing Saul when he has the opportunity to, because he says, I'm not going to touch the Lord's anointed. And I think the context that gets left out of that is he wasn't talking about correcting Saul's bad behavior. He was talking about killing Saul, right?
Yeah.
And I know, you know, there's more to it even than just that. But David refused to assassinate Saul. And that was the context in a lot of ways of what he's saying. He's like, you know, this is the Lord's anointed. I'm not going to kill him, assassinate him. That doesn't mean that that doesn't mean he couldn't criticize him and disagree with him or even publicly say what he's doing is wrong, because David did do those things.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think people like to take that sermon and or that idea of don't touch the Lord's anointed and use it as a way to shield a leader or a pastor, but I don't think that applies.
Yeah. And there's you know, the idea there too that David would have been next in line to be king in that situation, right? And so David would have killed Saul and assumed the role of king.
Yeah.
And that is not the same thing as calling out a pastor or an evangelist for false teaching or things that are going on in the church that are not right.
Right.
It's not, that's not the same thing as accountability.
Yeah.
I would not go to, you know, Greg Mitchell, the head pastor, and rebuke him and hope to get him removed from ministry so that I could assume the position. We're not even close to talking about the same thing.
Right. Yeah, David did not want to be a usurper. He wanted to allow God to put him on the throne in God's timing. And that's why he wasn't going to kill him in that moment. So yeah, it's so out of context. And the truth is, when someone says, touch not the Lord's anointed, what they're really saying is don't question authority. Don't question and don't criticize our leadership. You know, stay quiet, stay in your place. You know, and that's literally what he said in the prophecy. It was like, you know, stand in your place. Stand in your place, and that way God can reassign the church to revival. And sorry, go ahead.
It's not that we expect any church to be perfect or any leader to be perfect. Nobody expects that. You see that over and over again in the Bible. Every leader that you see has problems. David had problems. Saul had problems. Moses, all of them. Jesus was the only perfect one, and he is our perfect example. So we're not expecting perfection from anybody. And because they're not perfect, we're not like, oh, well, we don't have to listen to you. You know, because that's one of the things that we've been told. You're going to have an authority problem now forever. Like you have an authority problem, and you're always going to have an authority problem.
That's their thing, though. It's like, I heard that about myself.
Yeah.
Not mentioning any names, but
you're such a rebel, Tiffany.
Like, you know,
it's a Potter's houseism.
You just don't like rules and authority, and that's why you left. And it's like, you're just trying to come up with something, because I didn't explain my entire reasoning why I left initially. Like, so people are just manufacturing things of like why, you know. And so, and I think too, it's hard when you're, you know, that was one of the things we struggled with when we were there, is viewing everything through that kind of Potter's house taught lens. So then you get people that are, you know, when they are seeing us do this, and if they're totally bought in still, they're not seeing, they're going to respond to us in those same ways. Because they're not thinking through it, you know, completely objectively.
As in, like, they're gonna say we're rebels.
Yes, like their only viewpoint is through the Potter's house lens, and the Potter's house lens is there's no other way except for that you guys are rebels. Like, there's no way you could leave the church unless you're just backslidden or you're rebellious. Like you can't just leave and
you have an
just
authority
agree
problem.
to disagree. You have an authority problem. You don't like following rules. You have a demon spirit. You have all, you know, they've got a list of things that you are, but you're never just okay, and you're a Christian still, and we can agree to disagree. It's never that way.
It's never that way.
So that's one of those things, you know. We don't like authority or rules.
And I think that's also why, like, for me, it's not about convincing people who are Kool-Aid drinkers to not be Kool-Aid drinkers. You know, at the end of the day, the reality is what we're trying to do is share our experience and hope that there are people who are on the fence who would look at what we've been through and ask some honest questions about
That's exactly
themselves.
why,
Like,
yeah.
you know,
Because we know there's other people that are hurting and that are
Yes.
going through things like we did, and it proves. I mean, it's been mind blowing just seeing how much response we've gotten from the podcast. Like seeing the response and just how much people appreciate it and keep going. And you're doing, you're doing so much good for people, and just having that voice of like they wish they would have been able to say, whatever, and they've gone through the same exact thing. How many times have we heard people that have gone through the same things that we did? Hundreds of people.
Yes.
And being just encouraged by like, us just doing this podcast, and that's our goal, is like that God can help them, through all their struggles, mental struggles, trying to process everything just like we did. That's the goal, is to help people.
yeah. And I think the hard part is there really is no place in the Potter's house for you to just like disagree without being a rebel. And that's what's so hard. It's like, I can't, why can't I disagree with you or look at things differently or even bring something up without you saying just instantly like you're rebellious, you're in disunity. Maybe what I'm doing is like honestly trying to help the church.
Yeah.
And
Like
bring unity.
we were in so many ways, I was looking at things like I was frustrated with what's going on in the church. I'm frustrated as a believer. I'm frustrated as someone in ministry because I want to see people saved and I want to see the gospel spread in our community. And what's frustrating is you're like, we're doing things that are causing people in the community to not want to come to this church. We're doing things that are, it's not that you're just annoying me. That's not what it is. It's that you're doing something that I think is hurting the church, hurting people in the church, hurting people in the community. And maybe if you were wise, you would listen to people in the church who've been around for some time, but instead of, taking some advice or even listening or having an open ear to someone, you just immediately shut them down and say, no, if you don't agree with us, then you're rebellious. That's just not, to me, it's not a healthy church system.
No,
right?
It's not.
Absolutely
That's always
not.
how toxic environments work. Anytime a victim speaks up, there's always something wrong with the victim. They're either a liar or they're being dramatic or whatever. Like, that is how toxic systems work, whether that's in the world or whether that's in a church world. But like any kind of system that silences people who are like, hey, I'm hurting. You hurt me. You did something to hurt me. And their immediate response is to silence you. That is very dangerous, and that's a very toxic system.
If you don't agree with us, too bad. Just deal with it. Like, we're the ones in charge here.
Yep.
You're the sheep. You're dumb. You're a bunch of dumb sheep. You don't know what to do. Like, just trust in the shepherd here. I'll tell you where to go, and I'll use my stick. But it's like the Jonathan one. Like, let's listen to this. This is such a classic example of their mentality when it comes to how should I interact with my pastor.
If you want to survive, I believe that there's some decisions you have to make in advance. Number one, we need to pre-decide that if my pastor and I ever disagree about my character, I am pre-deciding that I'm wrong and he's right. And I would add to that, make a habit of non-defense.
Make a habit of non-defense. So, I mean, it's so hard because it's with everything. There's like some truth to it, right?
Yeah.
There's truth to the idea that we need to be able to be corrected. We need to be open to correction at times, but just the mindset that like every time me and my pastor disagree, I'm just pre-deciding I'm wrong and he's right.
I feel like it's almost like in a marriage too. Like, can you imagine like if you treated your spouse that way? Right. Like why is a pastor and you relationship different than a husband and, I mean, obviously there's differences between husband and wife, like the obvious ones, but I'm just saying like in relationships as general. Like, wouldn't that be weird to have a relationship with somebody where they're just like, I'm pre-deciding that you're always right, no matter what. You're like, that is a terrible That's
Yeah.
a terrible relationship.
Yeah.
I don't want to be friends with somebody like that.
Yeah.
And Jesus didn't treat people like that.
Right.
He was just going to lord over them and be like, it doesn't matter what I say or what I do. I'm always right.
Yep.
But that's how people get taken advantage of so much, is that I've made up my mind. I made up my mind 20 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, that if I ever disagree with my pastor, he's right and I'm wrong.
Right.
It just doesn't make any practical sense.
Yeah.
You're right. There is truth, and you should be correctable, teachable.
Absolutely.
If the facts present themselves that, yeah, I've got a wrong attitude.
Yeah.
But also, like, iron sharpens iron, Like, pastors that is a very unhealthy place for them to be, in thinking nobody can ever challenge me. Nobody can ever come to me and tell me that I'm wrong about something because I'm the king, I'm the boss, I'm the pastor. Like, how unhealthy for them to have to live that way. What a burden for them to carry, that they have to always be right.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, you think a good leader would be humble enough to be able to deal with correction themselves, or just kind of be on the same level as the people in their church. But I think that's part of the issue, is they don't view themselves as being on the same level.
Yeah.
Like they're somehow more important, superior, more special, smarter.
Better looking.
But, and they're immune. They're immune from criticism. Like you can't touch them. Don't
Yeah.
touch the Lord's anointed, right? That's the mindset of that talking point, or that, when people bring that up to us, it's like, don't touch the Lord's anointed. That's what you're saying,
Yeah.
that they're untouchable. They can't be criticized.
Yep.
They're somehow protected. That's not biblical. And if they're being authoritarian is not biblical, and that's what they are. And that's what that mindset is. When you say, I can't correct you, now all of a sudden you're just going to control my life. So yeah, David, I think in that context, he still spoke truth about Saul's behavior. He wasn't going to not criticize Saul. He still refused to participate in Saul's sin, and we see that with David, where he's removes himself kind of from the situation. In a lot of ways, he just isn't going to allow God to put him into that place in God's timing. But he never stopped talking about it, and he never just let it slide with Saul. He publicly declared Saul was wrong many times, and if you read through David's life, you see that over and over again, where he publicly declared Saul was wrong. So that's all we're doing.
Yep.
We're holding someone in authorities. We're holding someone in authority accountable.
Yep.
Publicly.
And that's practicing biblical discernment.
And we're not at all singling out anybody.
Yes.
It's the whole organization,
Right.
that has a problem.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what we're calling out. And we brought receipts from specific people,
Yeah.
and that's just to show our point is valid, but it's not like I'm picking on a certain person.
Yeah. We played like Chris Hart's prophecies because they are kind of they're kind of the main ultimate reason why we left, because what he did was sort of so in your face. But I mean, it's the whole leadership. It's Jesse, it's Greg, it's Chris, it's all of them.
Yep.
They're all ultimately accountable for what they're allowing happen in that church.
It's their whole system.
So do you think a pastor should be equated with a king?
No.
I guess
No.
that's the other part of it. So I guess if you're going to say, don't touch the Lord's anointed, then you're saying that a pastor is supposed to be my king.
Yeah.
I have this funny clip. I mean, I shouldn't say it's funny. Honestly, it's kind of scary, from Nigel Brown in the UK. He's the leadership pastor in England. And he said this.
Okay, sometimes that's out of your control. The king has already moved. The king has already decided. It is possible he has already removed you out of the workplace, out of the church, out of the ministry, out of a family gathering, or whatever it is. It's not about you moving. He's already done that. It's out of your control. You've been made redundant. Other people now have your position, ministry, etc., etc. But our text is not about things out of your control. This is not the ruler or the king. He's made a judgment. There is no choice. It is what it is. This text is dealing in the middle of this angst. It's about you picking up your bags and leaving your place. Ecclesiastes 10:4, if the anger of the ruler flares up against you, do not resign from your position. Now, what is interesting about our text is it doesn't discuss the issue whether the king is right or wrong. It doesn't discuss whether he is rightly angry with you. In other words, he has a justified reason. You have failed, or you have done something grievous, or there's a real issue. It doesn't deal with that. It doesn't deal whether you feel it's unjustified, because that's not the point. Because above our human king, and we could preach 1,000 sermons, and we have done and will do again, about authority and so forth and so on, and we get that. We respect that and we believe in that. But above our authority, above our king, is the King of Kings. And he is in control of our future.
So the whole point of his sermon, which apparently was in response to someone who left their church, is... despite how the king treats you, you need to remain in your place. Wow. So it's like he's echoing the same thing that we heard in the prophecy from Chris Hart.
Like just a broken record.
It's a broken record.
Yep.
It's, obey your earthly king is what he's saying. Like, we have our human king, and above that authority, we have the King of Kings. Yeah. So that's honestly just how they view themselves. They view themselves as like, I'm the ruler here, and you just need to obey me. And if I'm angry with you and you don't agree with me, then just stay in your place. Just deal with it. Yep.
They're the supernatural, God-anointed king in our lives.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's I think that's a problem too with just the kind of the system and the mindset in the Potter's house is they view the pastor as a king.
Yep.
And it's that fear again that goes back to putting the fear into people. Like if somebody leaves, they want to respond with a sermon, their own agenda, by the way. Then they, respond with a sermon that is going to instill fear into people. Like they just did this, but you better not you better not do it. You need to stay. And this is why you need to stay, because you don't want God to be angry with you.
Because you're going to lose God's anointing over your life, and God's going to curse you, and, all these other things. And, I think you had said earlier, like, if it's a good leader, if you're a good leader, I don't have a problem submitting to you and your authority or whatever. But if you're a bad leader and you treat people terribly and you hurt people, then you deserve to be called out. And people don't have to follow you and follow your authority because you're just abusing people. And how many people, like you said, did we hear in the comments that over and over and over again had the same story we did?
Yep. Having a king isn't a good idea.
It's not a good idea.
It's not.
God gave the people a king. With Saul and David, the people wanted a king, and God basically said, no, you don't want a king. I, all-knowing God, can tell you don't want a king.
Yeah, like it's not a good idea.
It's not a good idea.
It's going to be bad.
Yep,
trust me,
it's going to be so bad. And so, but the people insisted, and God finally said, "You know what? Have what you want. You can have a king." And the result was not good.
Yeah, I actually have that scripture pulled up. It says, "But when they said, 'Give us a king to lead us,' this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to him, 'Listen to all the people that are saying to you. Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not that they have rejected you, but they have rejected me as their king.'"
Ooh.
So God is telling Samuel, because Samuel's heartbroken, because he told, like you said, he told the people, it's not going to be good for you. Yeah. And they still want a king. And he's heartbroken. He prays to God, and God comes to him and says, it's not because they rejected you. It's because they rejected me. And so the reality is, like, God never intended for us to have a king.
Yes.
Yep.
He knew it was a bad idea for the very same reason that, for the things that we're dealing with in that church.
Yep.
Their mindset is, I'm your king. I'm your authority. I'm unquestionable. You can't criticize me. I'm immune to your, disagreement. And if we're in disagreement, then we're in disunity. And guess who's going to go? Not you. Or not me.
Not
it's
me,
going to be
it's
you.
Yeah, that's right.
It's us.
Yep.
And so that's exactly why we're not meant to have a king. That's why when Jesus came, like, Jesus established a relationship with individual people that we no longer need to have any kind of mediator between us and Jesus. So and it's hard to say stuff like this without getting it taken out in context, but the reality is I don't need a pastor. I don't need someone to explain to me how to have a relationship with God.
Right.
Like, if I was on a desert island, I could serve God and make it. But they like they like having this opinion or this idea that, no, you can't make it on your own. You have to have a church. You have to have a pastor. You have to have a shepherd. And I agree. It's good to have a shepherd. It's good to have a pastor. It's good to have healthy leaders.
Yes.
To be in a healthy church. But when things are unhealthy and things are toxic, and you feel like you're being poisoned and you feel like you're spiritually dying, then you need to get out of it. And then I think it's also good and responsible for people like us who I think are mature believers who grew up in the church and have like a little bit of skin in the game. I think it's good for people like us to speak up too and say, hey, publicly, this happened to us and this was wrong. And there are people there. You should think about going to that church and supporting that church and supporting those leaders.
Be warned. Be warned if you go.
And leaders who, by the way, when talking about being a shepherd, refer to sheep as dumb, helpless, can't live on their own, literally.
Yeah.
That's how they view their flock.
Right. Yep.
So, do you want to be a part of that?
Yeah.
It's funny because that's one of the other, comments that people have said is like, we're hurting God's work by speaking out against it. Like that we are going to hurt the work that they're doing. But it's like, okay, when I was going to your church, I was this dumb sheep. And now all of a sudden I can harm God's work. Like the Pharaoh in the Old Testament, like he was the most powerful man on earth. He couldn't stop God's movement when God wanted something to happen. He didn't have enough power or authority to stop it. When God wants something to go forward, you are not going to harm God's work. God's going to do what he's going to do. But now all of a sudden we went from dumb sheep to like having this amazing power that we're going to harm God's work. It's like, that doesn't make any sense to me either.
Definitely not.
Yeah, and I think the only ones really harming God's work are the toxic leaders.
Yeah.
Agreed. Absolutely.
It's not the people, it's not blame the victims, right? And we're not trying to act like we're victims. We don't have, we're not sitting here licking our wounds and crying about spilt milk.
Right.
Our lives God has blessed us since we left.
Yep.
Like I feel like I'm living in victory more now than I ever have in my whole life.
Absolutely.
Same for
having
me.
left.
100%.
Yep.
But I really desperately look back and I want people who are in the same boat to also experience what we're experiencing. And that's why we're bringing this stuff up.
Yes.
We're not trying to come at it like we're victims,
Yeah.
but what we are doing is calling out toxic leadership, spiritual abuse, controlling and authoritarian pastors who will not allow people to speak into their lives and bring any correction. They've had 50, 60 years to correct what's been going on, but it's been slowly getting worse and worse and worse. And the Board of Elders isn't doing anything about it. The Church Council in Prescott isn't doing anything about it. So someone needs to speak up.
Yep. Absolutely. And that, to me, as I've pondered, why are you doing this? Is it out of hurt? Is it out of love? Because, you really should be doing it out of a place of love is one of the questions that's been brought up to me. And I've sat with that question for a couple days, and I've really tried to be honest with myself about it. And the reality is, it is for love, because I care about the people in that church.
Yeah.
and the leadership is not seemingly anywhere close to repentance or changing anything. And more people are going to get hurt. And I think realistically, none of us really want to do this a lot of times. It's not like we just want to get on our soapbox and, become famous and become public. And that's not what this is about for us. It's not even something we necessarily want to do, but we feel like we need to do this for the sake of those people that are still struggling in that system.
Yeah.
And that is love.
Yeah.
That's where it's coming from.
Yeah, it's such a twist, right, of the circumstances, because what they're saying is, do you love those leaders, those bad leaders? Why would you speak out against them if you are a Christian and you love them? And just like you're saying, our love is for the people, the body of Christ, the church, and those leaders are accountable for what they've done.
Yeah.
And if they're if they are bad leaders, and they're sinning against the sheep, and they're abusing the flock, they need to get called out. And that's love, like you said.
Yep.
That's love. Because the reality is a New Testament leader isn't put in place, like a king was with anointing and prophets, right? God anointed and had a prophet come and pour anointing oil on those kings, and he chose them in many cases. The New Testament says that leader is appointed based off of his character, not based off of his gifting or his charisma or, how good he speaks, how intelligent he is, how handsome he is. In the New Testament, you are given authority based off of your character. And if you prove that you don't have the character to be a good leader, and nobody is willing to say something, then people somehow need to be able to call you out.
Well, how did they choose, after Jesus died and Judas died, how did they choose to replace him? They voted on it.
Right.
They all got together and they, as a group, decided who should come and fill that spot. It wasn't one person deciding, this is the one that's going to do it, which is how it works at the Potter's house. Nobody gets any choice we don't vote on anything. We don't talk about it. It's like a very small group of people that are deciding everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And you see this pattern of victim blaming, a lot of times when it comes to stuff like this. And, I know there was definitely a time when I used to hate that type of language, when someone talks about that, with that psychological language of, victim blaming and stuff like that. But I think there actually really is truth to it. That what happens is, rather than protect the person who's been hurt, you point your finger at them and you say, well, you got hurt because of you. And look at your motives, and why are you doing this? And why are you saying that? And, we will protect the leaders and blame the victims. And that's what people in a lot of cases are doing.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. Just deflecting.
Yep. And I agree. The word victim almost makes me cringe a little bit in a lot of ways. But the reality is, what we've been through and what others are going through, it is very traumatic.
Yes.
And I'm not trying to feel sorry for myself and, like you said, lick my wounds, but it changed our whole life.
Yes.
It turned it upside down.
Yeah.
And it's very traumatic.
Yeah, and I think the other side of that is all the comments of people who have been watching our podcast and talking about their experiences. Like, some of them have been through some traumatic stuff as a result of the Potter's house.
Yeah.
And you look at them and you're like, dang, my situation, obviously I had some problems and some grievances, but I didn't get hurt like you got hurt. And so we've had so many people comment and share their stories, and I'm like, man, you're truly been a victim of abuse, whether that's words or, just so many things that honestly, it's sad. It's sad to hear. And those people need a voice.
They do.
But in the Potter's house, you can't criticize the leader because he's the king, and don't touch the Lord's anointed. That's such a twisting of that mindset. And the reality is, people need to have an avenue where they can approach leadership, and, they can approach with being hurt and and there's someone who will listen to them.
Yep.
And if that's got to be this podcast where we start to share those stories, then that's what we're going to do.
That's what we're going to do.
Because we're not going to be silent and just, like people want to say like, oh, you should just like go away and let God handle it.
Yep.
I do think God's going to deal with it.
Yeah.
I do think that God is going to judge it. But maybe this is part of God's way of doing it.
Could be. Could be.
Like, did you think of that? Like,
Yeah.
maybe God's going to use us to judge some of these things.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going to believe God that he is going to judge certain people and certain leaders and things like that. But that doesn't mean that we just have to shut up and not say anything.
No. And again, that would not be actually the biblical way of approaching it.
Right.
Based on 1 Timothy 5.
Yeah.
So.
Well, people are saying God's going to judge us too. We've had people say that God's going to judge us for speaking out, and well, so far God's only just blessed us. So I only feel closer to him now than I've ever felt before.
That's a reality for me. I know beyond the shadow of a doubt I have a relationship with God now that I have never had before.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me that's a work of, the devil.
Yeah.
Demonically inspired.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
I know. What do you think? You're awfully quiet over there.
Just a little tired.
Oh, now you're a victim.
No.
I mean, I think, and I know because you and I have talked about this so many times, but just the feeling that we've had since leaving, just the blessing and the freedom and the mental clarity, the lack of confusion, I don't know if you want to maybe speak to some of that, but.
Well, I think that's a lot of the reason why we do want to speak about this, is because we do see things on the other side of it. And when we've gone through, all of us have gone through like struggling for years over different issues and seeing a lot of things not only we went through, but friends of ours have gone through or whatever. And you see all that, and then coming out on the other side and being able to just breathe and being able to feel like you have this breath of fresh air, that you have this relationship with God in a different light now, because we view God in such a different way. And it's not this, it's like it's hard to explain to somebody, but you get just a breath of fresh air whenever you actually take that step and trust God with what we've biblically backed all this stuff up. We've done some investigation. We've read into this, and this is what we truly believe, this is, this path is leading us down a road we don't want to go, and it's not biblical. So we're going to trust God and go forward. And when we did that and we took that step of faith, God blessed all of us for that. And he was visibly doing things for us to make a way for us to move, and to, all those steps of where we're hesitating to not leave the church yet. And, maybe this or that. And God almost just like, he just pushes you along, and, and it's like God just prepared the steps.
Yeah.
What do you say
Really,
to
he just
people who
prepared the
say
steps.
the reason why you left is because you're rebels? Like, if anybody knows Tiffany, Tiffany is the least rebellious person I've ever met in my life.
Seriously.
Like,
She's the nice one.
Oh gosh.
yeah.
I just think it's you can laugh about it, or you can just, you can't change their mind. It's just, to me, it's to each their own, but it's like what would I say to them? I mean,
Would you slap them?
I don't know. I mean, it's just the mindset of like me, like you said, like there's nothing in me that wanted to rebel, that wanted to, even in their mind. But that's all they know is like when someone leaves and they're disagreeing with their pastor, they're automatically in rebellion, and that's just not biblical. Like you're not gonna
Yeah.
They're going to have to do the research on their own and not just buy into what they're being told over the pulpit.
It almost
because
takes
that's
like a
what's
supernatural.
yes. And that's
break
what
in
it
your
was for
mind.
us, really.
Yeah.
It was like over time, it's like God's like,
Well, and then-
triggering our thoughts and things that we're like, no, this isn't right. And then you're like, but the pastor's saying that,
Yeah.
Yep.
and you're having to just mental struggle for years.
It's like they
work
brainwash.
through all of that.
Or like a comment, where someone will be like, I pray that you get saved.
Oh, I know.
Like,
To me, it's just
I'm
Backslider, come home.
Backslider, come home. Like, I pray you get saved. It's like, that's their mindset.
That's just
that
the
because we
Potter's House
disagree with the
mindset
Potter's House,
of-
now
yeah.
we're not saved. Now we're
Exactly.
rebelling against God.
Because there's no way you could disagree with the Potter's House and possibly still be saved. Like, there must be something wrong with you, wrong with your heart. That's what the pastors, when they're counseling you, it's like, well, what's really the issue here? Why are you questioning things? Because maybe you wouldn't be questioning things if something wasn't wrong with you. Like, there's got to be a deeper reason for this. And we're just, when you are raised in that, that's the way your brain is trained to think. So they're naturally not going to think through that logically. Like, you really do it takes God to really wake you up and see things the way the Bible is really portraying them, and not the way Potter's House is portraying them, because there's so much of that little stuff, like, that we just had to work through, and it's just, I don't know, like, it's just a breath of fresh air. It just felt like so relieved when we left, and we were able to just I felt like you could just breathe. You don't have people.
It's like a burden.
Yes, exactly.
It's funny how the very first question that gets asked the moment you start bringing up disagreements is, who have you been talking to?
Yeah.
Because it just shows their mindset. Their mindset is anyone disagreeing has this spirit of rebellion.
Yep.
And this spirit of rebellion just like, it just...
So powerful.
Yeah, it just moves through the church and it spreads like wildfire. And it's like... What's so funny is we had disagreements and we had things that we were questioning, and we hadn't talked to anyone.
Hadn't talked to
Literally,
a
the
single
only
person.
people that I had talked to about a lot of this stuff was you guys,
Us.
because we're family.
Yep.
And then when
And
I
we're friends.
well, that's. But just that whole thing. It's like, I'm not talking to anyone.
Right.
I just, and it's so funny that other people are saying the same thing. Maybe you guys should think about that.
Yeah, but so it's like, darned if you do, darned if you don't.
Yes.
Right? Because if you are talking to somebody, well, that's your problem. If you're not talking to somebody, well, then it's definitely a spirit.
Yeah.
It's a demon.
And I was told that
Right.
when we left, it was like, well, you guys weren't talking to someone? Well, then that proves it's a spirit.
Exactly.
And I'm like, literally,
Yeah.
that
That
is
makes
such a Potter's House way of thinking
Yeah.
that we had all been taught, was like the only, they want to make sense of it logically. Like, you don't like rules or authority. It's obviously a spirit, and this is just the spirit's lashed onto you somehow. But like, where did that spirit come from, and why do I have it and you don't have it? And like, there's so much
It's like something you catch when you're out. Like, I touched the grocery cart and I got it.
That's what they make it
Like
feel
strep
like.
throat.
It's like COVID.
Like, how did I?
I didn't take my medication in prayer and Bible reading.
We're gonna walk around with our rebellion masks on.
To be on the other side of that and them telling you that, and you're like, I'm just thinking, I didn't even respond in that moment, because I'm like, they literally are so blind to that.
I know.
So blind to the fact that, like, do you hear yourself,
Yeah.
what you're saying? Like, it
Right.
doesn't make logical sense, but you're telling me those are the only two options for me.
Yeah.
That I'm either, you can either backslide and go that route, but if you didn't backslide and you're just leaving the church, you're either in rebellion or it's a spirit. In neither one of you have no other area, no other
nothing
route,
else. But that's
in their minds.
That's
And it's
why
like,
doing
it's just-
this podcast was and is so hard for us,
Yep.
is because when we left that atmosphere in that church, it was such a burden lifted, because there's so much condemnation put on you in that church. Everything there is so performative, and it's heavy, like we had talked about. It's like a heavy load. So when we got away from that, it was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yeah.
But when we talk about this and we put ourselves out there, we expose ourselves again to all of those people.
It's true.
When they
Yeah.
make comments and when they say things to us like, you guys are just rebels and you need to get saved. And once again, it's like they're trying trying to reach out and put that condemnation back on us, and we have to be like, no, I'm not going to let you put that condemnation back on me, because I know that we are right. What we're saying is the truth. We're not lying about this. We are right in this. Yep. And so that's why for me, it's hard when we do this podcast, because I know, okay, here come the crazies. They're going to come out because they think they're right, and they're so passionate about their belief in it. You can't convince them.
Yeah, when they come across, like when you were talking about the people that are saying, you know, that you need to get, you know, there's hope for you, and you can get saved, and you can return to Jesus, basically. And it's like, so that's very prideful. For one, you have no idea anything about me, and you're just assuming that I'm backslidden. That's God's business, not yours. Like, me and God, you know, can work that out. But like, for somebody to come at you like in those ways, a lot of times it comes off very prideful to me. Yes. That you're assuming a lot of things to come to this conclusion.
Absolutely.
And really, how dare you do that? Like, you know, it's
Religious
just very
pride.
it's divisive, and it's like you're just assuming a lot to be very, and they sound so sure of themselves.
It's shutting down conversation.
It completely shuts down conversation. It's like in no way are they being humble about anything. Like, they're just, it's
and
just
I think
blows me away.
The important part for me is what we're trying to do is foster the conversation. Like, the important part is that we're talking about these things. We're not going to be right about everything. You know, we're not going to be right about every doctrinal issue or whatever. We're on a journey ourselves. Like, we're trying our best, and we're learning, and we're growing. And so, you know, we have our critiques, and we have things that we disagree with. But what we're not trying to do is shut down the conversation. Yeah. What we're not trying to do is say, hey, you know, you guys shut up and just listen to us, because we know what's best. You know, but that's what they're doing. Yeah. And anytime you speak out, the criticism is, you guys just need to let God deal with it and be quiet. Yeah. And it's like, you know,
that's more about protecting them, though. It's more about protecting the Potter's house than anything, because that's what they do. Is it's a very like protective, you know, they go into protection mode and want to like, don't talk about it. Don't talk about it, you know, and it's true. Yeah. They don't.
They don't trust
They
God.
want us to like Homer Simpson back. Just go away.
Yeah. Don't cause any problems. Yeah. Don't ruffle any feathers. Don't talk about the problems.
So let's talk about what our accusations are. So I think it'd be good just to let people know what we are saying as far as, and being clear on what our accusations are against the Potter's house and against the leaders there. I think the first thing that we are accusing them of, and we are calling them out on, is false prophecy in a public setting. Yep. Right? Like, we're calling that out because that happened, and we know it happened over and over again from more than one witness, not just us. There are people who we never even talked to that dealt with false prophecy. There are people who were told things were going to happen that never happened. Yep. There are times that they used information that was happening behind closed doors in counseling sessions and brought them into public prophecy. So when you say, "Thus saith the Lord," you're claiming divine authority, and when you're falsely speaking for God, that's called blasphemy, right? That's misrepresenting God. That's misrepresenting his character. And the Bible specifically calls that sin, right? And so that's what we're saying. Like, that, it's not just a whoopsies or a mistake. Ultimately, when you do this and you do it repeatedly over and over again, and it doesn't get corrected even when people bring it up, that is sin. Yep. And so that's what we're saying here without any false pretense. You know, God rebuked false prophets in the Bible. Yep. And they are wolves in sheep's clothing. Yes. And so we are calling it out. I think Jeremiah 23:16 is a really good scripture. They speak visions from their own minds, not from the mouth of the Lord. I'm against the prophets who wag their own tongues and yet declare, the Lord declares, I am against those who prophesy false dreams, declares the Lord. They tell them and lead my people astray with their reckless lies, yet I did not send or appoint them. They do not benefit these people in the least, declares the Lord.
Yeah, and if you are in the Potter's house and you care about that movement, then I would think you would want to address this. Yes. I would think you would want to fix this, because God's saying, I'm not for you if you're doing this. Right. And if God's not for you, then what are you guys doing?
Right. Yep. So we're calling out the sin of false prophecy.
Yep.
I think we're also calling out the covering up of that sin
Yep.
and the cover up culture that happens at the Potter's house.
Yep.
The sin of leaders not addressing those things publicly. Because when someone is harming people publicly with a public platform, it needs to be called out publicly
Yes.
over the pulpit.
Yes.
So that's in also another sin, which is the sin of omission. And, Eli, we know the story of Eli, the priest, the Levite, and his sons Hophni and Phinehas. They were Levite priests. His sons were wicked, right? They were sexually immoral. They were stealing the best meat from the sacrifices that meant to go to God. And God called them out, and he told Eli what's going on. Eli goes to his sons and says, "Why are you doing this?" But he didn't stop them. He didn't remove them. He didn't really deal with the issue. And so God ultimately judged him. He killed Hophni and Phinehas, and ultimately he killed Eli because Eli knew, but he didn't act on that knowledge. And that's the sin of omission that's also happening at the Potter's house.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because they know about what's going on, but they don't want to address it publicly.
Yep.
And I think more than anything, they're not protecting their sheep, right? They're not protecting the people that God has put in their care.
Yep.
God's rebuke to Eli was, "Why then do you scorn my sacrifice and honor your sons above me?" That's what he told Eli. So in other words, like, you just ignore their sin because they're your sons, you know? And we see this in the Potter's house with Greg and his sons, spiritual sons, right?
There's so many multiple stories we've heard since we left of just that spiritual abuse. And it's part of that is him covering up things that he knows about. They've been brought to his attention, and doesn't want to deal with it for his whatever own benefit somehow, but that's on him. But it does not get dealt with, and it should have been dealt with. And it because you don't deal with things, it harms other people in the churches. The people that are being harmed are the people that are under these pastors that aren't being dealt with, that are under, that leadership that is telling you, don't disagree with your pastor, just suck it up, you'll be fine, don't worry about it. And these people in reality are not fine, and they can't stop worrying about it because they're hurt and they have real problems that need to be addressed. And that's the harm in it. And I can't see God being okay with that.
Yeah.
Like, they're gonna, in the name of what? Like, there's no way that you can convince me that God is okay with, people abusing their power like that. And it's like, well, this is your authority. Just suck it up and you'll be fine. And don't say this and don't do that. And,
No, the truth is that God holds leaders accountable.
yeah.
He holds them accountable not just for their sin, but he holds them accountable for tolerating sin.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening is they're tolerating abuse.
Yep.
We know, and maybe you can pull up the text on your phone while I'm talking about it, but we know of a girl who had some issues with her own marriage and ended up having to move in with her brother, who is a pastor in our fellowship, one of Greg's sons. And basically, the reality is he just treated her like absolute garbage, and he's a pastor, and there's no excuse for some of the stuff that he did.
Yep.
And I won't go into all the details, but he definitely treated her like garbage.
Yeah.
And it's to the point where she was so sick and tired of it that she was going to move back home, which would have been back to Prescott. And so she talked to the leader, Greg Mitchell, about what was going on, about how she was being mistreated, about things that were happening to her. And his response to her is just, well, yeah, you can move back, but don't say anything bad about your brother because he's a pastor. And
So I leave out the names.
you can just read it and I'll bleep anything out we want to bleep out.
We can bleep stuff out.
So just read this. This was Greg Mitchell's text to this girl who had been living with her brother, who is a pastor, and he was treating her like garbage. She tells Greg the stuff he's been doing, and she wants to move back, and Greg says it's okay, but just don't say anything bad.
Yeah, it was a very abusive situation.
It was.
He responds to her, I'm not sure exactly when I'll be able to call due to time differences in church, etc. One way or another, you must not say anything negative about. You tell people what you said to me. You were always here temporarily thinking about whether to return to your home church. And for the last few months, you felt God dealing with you. If you say anything negative, you will make your life very difficult. With some distance, you will be able to heal the relationship, but only if you don't say anything negative. I'm sure you don't want to say anything negative anyway, because if they're your friends, you don't want to harm them.
Once again, victim blaming.
Yeah.
You're going to harm people by telling the truth.
Yeah. So there's no like, I'm going to deal with him. I'm not going to tolerate the way that a pastor treated you, any of those things. It's, it's okay to do what you want to do, but just don't say anything bad about your brother. And it's so like forceful and gross the way he talks to her.
It's very,
he's like, you will not say anything.
It was very
bad.
manipulative. His wording was like,
It's almost like a threat.
He
sounded like threatening.
threatening and trying
Yeah.
to like
You
control
will
the
be
way
sorry.
she's thinking. But you know what I mean? Like it was very like
Very
a controlling
manipulative.
text, manipulative text.
But this is what Greg does. This is his
Yeah.
MO. When people want to leave or people disagree with him, he doesn't just like let them leave. He also has to like pronounce a curse over them. Like bad things are going to happen to you.
Yeah.
You know, and he does that all
that
the
was
time.
the only thing he was worried about was protecting her brother and and the things people heard about him.
Yes.
Mind
Right.
you, he should have been taken out of that position.
Absolutely.
Completely taken out of that
There's
position.
no way the stuff that he said to
people-
her and did to her, like that would be a Christ-like man
Absolutely
of God.
not.
Absolutely
Absolutely
not at
not.
all.
Right. But we're not going to protect the victims.
Right.
We're going to protect the kings.
Yep.
Yep.
You know, his spiritual sons.
Yep.
Eli's spiritual sons.
Yep.
So yeah, unfortunately that's a pattern, and there's a lot of stories very similar like that we are going to be sharing
Yes.
in future episodes. So y'all can look forward to that. I've gotten so many people reach out to me, and honestly, I can't wait to share some of those stories because I think they're very powerful. So let's maybe just kind of close it up here and talk about what we're looking for as a result of these podcasts. Like, what do we want to see happen? I think that's a good question to answer. Where are you guys at? I think for me personally, the reality is what I want to see is a public apology.
Yep.
I want to see them come out and apologize over the pulpit on their platform that they have, which is to say, look, we messed up. We made a mistake. I think when there's been public sin, there needs to be public accountability.
Yep.
And they need to own it and admit it and apologize for it. And if they do that, I will proclaim it, to the rooftops. I will show the apology, and I will applaud their apology, and then I'll sit and watch and see, if it was genuine.
Was it genuine, or was it just words
Right.
trying to put out another fire?
Because I think ultimately what really needs to happen is a change in leadership.
That'll never happen.
Well, it's probably not, but that's what needs to happen. There needs to be a change in the way that they
Yeah.
do things.
Absolutely.
Because there has been a toxic system put in place.
Yep.
And they need to stop caring more about the leader than the victims,
But the people at the top are benefiting too much being at the top. And there's nothing is set in place to remove those leaders, because the elders and the church council, it's a joke. Like they have no authority. They can't remove anybody.
Well, I think if they had a good leader who came in and, changed the mindset and the system and the culture to a culture where the shepherd actually is a servant and cares for his flock, I think that would be a huge, huge benefit.
Yep.
And like I said, if they did something like that, we would proclaim it to everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But what unfortunately happens is a lot of times, their mindset is, well, if you don't like what we do, then just go find another church.
Yep.
And I thought that, I'm like, What kind of a shepherd says that?
Yeah.
I know.
Right? If you don't like this flock, then just go to another flock, right? Like a shepherd cares about his sheep.
Yeah.
You know, that's the role. That's your job as a leader. Is like you care for these people. Like you leave the 99 to go find the one. That's
Right.
the heart of Jesus.
Yep.
Whereas in their case, it's like abandon the one.
Yep.
If he's not in line with the rest of us 99, then get out of here,
Idiot
dude.
wandered.
Yeah.
Kill him.
And
Let him die.
if they genuinely believe that if you leave the Potter's house, then you're just like damned to hell forever because you're a rebel, why would they just let us go so easily? They didn't like even try to like reach out to us. Greg Mitchell never called us. He never talked to us. You know,
Yeah.
if you genuinely believe that you go to another church, you have a demon spirit, I would hope that if you loved me and you cared about me, that you would, you know, maybe make some kind of effort. Instead, it was like, bye.
Yeah. I know. I remember a sermon that he preached last year, and he was talking, using a story about someone who came to him, and he was like, am I correct in thinking that we haven't talked in like 15 years? And he's like, why haven't you come talk to me? You know, you and me haven't had a conversation in 15 years. And this person was coming to them with like, you know,
grievance.
a grievance,
Yeah.
an issue. Wow. And he's like, I've been praying for you and I love you and all this stuff. And it's like, I kind of looked at it from my perspective of like, you're the pastor.
Yep.
Yeah.
How have you allowed
That's right.
Somebody in your church.
to not have a conversation with them for 15 years?
Yeah.
Like, don't you think maybe it's not like you have a church of 10,000 people.
Yeah.
You know, y'all have 600 on a good day.
Yeah.
At most.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yep.
Reality is like Sunday night and Wednesday night, there's like, you know, they're pushing like 300.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
350.
Yeah, but I mean, just so there's no excuse for you to have someone in your church for 15 years you haven't had a conversation with.
Yeah. That's such a good point.
Take someone out to lunch maybe once in a while.
Yep.
I don't know. Maybe it's asking too much.
That's asking way too
From
much.
a shepherd.
Yeah. All I know is this new church that we found that has been awesome. I introduced myself to the pastor when we first moved here after we'd been there for maybe a couple weeks, and the first thing he wanted to do was take me out to lunch.
Yep.
You know?
I say that the youth pastor here, when we first moved here, he took Brenton out, Carter out, took him out to lunch, and then he even took Taylor out to lunch recently, my older son, and just the two of them just went out to lunch. The two of them talked, wanted to know his story. He told him, you know, Taylor told him his story. He told Taylor his story. And then at the end, he was like, is there anything I could pray for you, man? You got anything going on in your life right now? And Taylor was dumbfounded because in all the years that we were in Prescott, not one person on staff, from the youth pastor to anybody on staff, ever took him out one-on-one to lunch, ever. And he was born and raised in that church. Never had somebody on staff just take him out to lunch and ask him, is there anything I can pray for you? How are you doing? Because to them, it's like, you know, Taylor's not the guy that's like going on outreaches and, you know, being at the 180. He's just kind of a quiet guy. He takes after his dad a lot in that regard, where he just is kind of there. He's in the background, but he's a good guy. He's got a good heart. But they didn't have time to invest in Taylor because Taylor wasn't like that disciple material. So they didn't even bother with him. And I'm like, we've been in this church for how many months? And that was the first time in his whole life anybody did that.
And by the way, this church is fairly close in size to the one we came from.
Yeah.
I mean, they're getting there.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's a small church and Taylor's the only
Right.
person that's, you know,
Exactly.
it's like, this is a large church with
Yeah.
a very big youth group.
Very
and you
big.
can get lost in the shuffle, but he stepped out, you know, he noticed that we were new.
Yep.
He went out of his way to, you know, and you can see that they genuinely care about people. And it's not just because there's some sort of benefit, like, oh, maybe this guy will, you know, maybe this guy will go out to preach one day.
Right,
or
exactly.
Maybe this guy will, you know, if I talk to him enough, maybe he'll start, you know, doing this
He'll
or
be
that.
my
and
disciple.
you should get involved and you should do this and that. It's coming from a really genuine place.
He just
that we've
genuinely
really
wanted to get to
appreciated.
know him. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that has come from all the leaders in this church here. The love that and the care that they have shown towards us and our kids, it's like completely opposite of what we experienced at the Potter's house.
So is there anything else that you guys would kind of be looking for as a result or hoping for as a result of us doing this podcast?
I think we could all say that I'm the mean one, the meanest one of all of us. And I don't really care about what happens with Greg Mitchell or any of those people. The only reason I'm doing this is for the people who are the victims. And I want to see people who have been hurt, people who are either, debating if they want to stay or go, get free. Like, that is my heart. That's who I'm doing this for. That's the only reason that I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're kind of the burn it all down.
I am. I'm like, dude, I would have just like faded into the night and never saw any of those people, never spoken to them again. I would have been fine, but like, bye, But I think, it's the people that are hurt, the people that come from where we came from. Those are the people that I care about. And those are the ones that I want to see this help them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know we all know that for a fact there are far more people in that church that struggle with the same things we wrestled with for years, that just don't know how to deal with it. They maybe never will say anything. The whole intimidation factor, all that, we know they're in the same place in a lot of ways we were, and just want them to hear like a new perspective.
Yeah.
That's not a Potter's House, World Christian Fellowship Ministries worldview.
Yeah, and to those people, there are good churches out there.
There are so many good churches.
I think some of those people, and I've seen this in the comments too, of like, we feel stuck. I just responded to someone who was saying how her and her husband are in the same place we were, and they just feel stuck because they have family. They know they're going to be shunned, the moment they leave. And I know that that's hard for people because you're worried about losing your family and losing connections, and your whole world is going to change. And there's truth to that. Unfortunately, we experience that. Yep. But none of that's worth the stress and the vexation that you go through, and the mind battles that you're dealing with trying to stay there and make it work. And there's amazing churches out there. And so
to stay, you really have to justify a lot. You have to constantly be justifying why they're doing what they're doing, because you're deep down not really, it's not okay, and it's, certain things are off or wrong or whatever. And I think it just comes down to, I think a lot of that is like, what do you want to give your life to? Do you want to keep pouring into this? Like, for a lot of people, I think it's kind of sad that when people disagree and they just stay. It's sad to me because and I get the whole struggle. I get, you have family in the church still, and the repercussions that can come because but at the same time, I think you benefit more in the long run because you're sacrificing, you're doing those things because you want better for your own family and the future generations. You don't want them, to me, it's like people that stay and you're just putting up with things and you like, don't want to make a fuss. You're still kind of you're going to be doing damage in the long run because your kids and their kids are going to be stuck in that same cycle. And that's what I thought of so much when we were leaving or trying to leave, was like, we're doing this for a reason. And it's like, that goal is, if we feel strongly about this, we need to do something about it. And I don't want this to continue. And I think that's, you really got to think things through.
Yeah.
Your kids will fight the battles that you refuse to fight.
Yeah.
And if you refuse to acknowledge that there's stuff going on in that church and you're not willing to rise up and fight those battles, you're leaving those battles for your kids to fight.
Exactly.
That's really good point. That's so valid.
Yeah. Well, we're at an hour and a half.
Oh.
Okay.
So we should
Let's let these people go.
But
well, I think we hit it all.
Yeah, I think that was really good. Lots of good points. And I think, ultimately, again, sort of just to kind of cap this off, it's been overwhelmingly positive, just the reactions and the comments and the support. And so we just really appreciate all those people. We would say continue to comment, to like the videos. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. It helps us to know like how many people we're reaching. It also helps every time we put a video out to just reach a few more people, and YouTube will share our video with more people and put it in front of more eyeballs. And that's what we're hoping for, is just more people to be impacted by what we're saying and our experience, and sharing what happened with us and how God's helped us. Hopefully will help more people. So yeah, looking forward to some future episodes. We got some good stuff coming. So till next time.
Till next time.
All right.